I thought we'd have a chat today about how carrying a passenger or pillion on your motorcycle can enhance your motorcycling experience. I started riding bikes, I think it was back in 1981. I passed my test in 84, and I didn't actually pass my car test until 87, I think it was. So in those intervening years, from me first taking on a motorcycle to me starting to drive a car, a motorcycle was my only mode of transport. And in my head, it became fixed as being a mode of transport first and an object of pleasure second. Now, I think it probably started in the 1990s. Everything changed. People would pass the car test and get a car first, and then a little bit later on, sort of 10 years later, they would sort of start thinking about they were missing out on something and they wanted a motorcycle, so we'd pass the bike test and get a bike. And bikes were a plaything. I think that's pretty much as the scene nowadays. They're a toy to a lot of people, nothing more. Yet in my head, a bike is still fixed as a mode of transport. That's how I see them. Now, in those early years of motorcycling, for me, it was my only form of transport. So, you know, for courting, socialising, getting to work, shopping, anything else that I needed to do, I had to ride a bike, and the bike had to work. It had to fit in with my lifestyle. So, you know, if I was going on holiday with a girlfriend of the time or whatever, we went on a bike and she went with me on the back of the bike. The bike would be used for days out. It would be used for visiting relatives out of town. That was my life, and that's why I'm still sort of into bikes now. I ride around these days, and yeah, you do see motorcyclists carrying passengers on their bikes, but it's nowhere near as common as it used to be. And it seems to me that a lot of people are perhaps missing out on their overall motorcycling experience. Now, at the beginning of this year, I've got a car, my partner's got a car. I got a little bit fed up of the problems that go with a car. Petrol consumption, not so much, but certainly getting parked up when you get to your destination, finding somewhere to leave the car where you're not going to get a ticket, or it's not going to cost you an arm and a leg for parking. Now, there are places where you can park free, but generally there's a time limit attached to that of 2 to 3 hours. And I know certainly getting on towards the back of last year, or maybe even the beginning of this year during the winter, it was getting to the point where I was getting a little bit fed up of constantly clock watching while we were out, you know, making sure that we didn't end up with a hefty penalty for overstaying in a car park or a parking space for, you know, an extra 15 minutes or whatever. So we started taking the Classic 350 out. Now, Paula likes the Classic 350. She finds it comfortable, and most importantly, I think for her, what sort of changed her mind, because she, you know, I've had bikes all the time, I've known her. She's been on various bikes from GS Adventures to the T120. She liked the lower power, the fact that it, you know, it wasn't a bike that was constantly surprising her as a passenger. It doesn't matter how hard you wind the throttle back on this bike, there's no sort of sudden inertia that can catch a pillion by surprise. It's a comfortable bike, it handles well, and what we both loved about it was that, you know, when we got to our destination, you can pack it free and you don't have to watch the clock afterwards. Now, what I liked about it is that, you know, you can put bags on the bike so that you can carry anything back that you buy if you go shopping. So we've used this for grocery shopping, clothes shopping, just generally sort of going out and sightseeing. We've even used it for Paula's hobby of, you know, house plants. You can get house plants and transport them on a bike quite easily, as long as you don't go too far, and that's the wonderful thing about a bike is you can't spend too much money while we're out because we don't have the room to carry it all back. But it was a real head turner for me in that I've probably been able to use the bike far more this year than any other time that I've known her, because ordinarily if you and your partner don't ride together, you find you're having to choose little windows where you can ride, you know, a Saturday morning or afternoon, or the same on a Sunday where you perhaps meet up with your mates, you go for a ride and you're back in 3 or 4 hours, because you know, as somebody who's in a committed relationship, you have other commitments and you need to take care of those for your own happiness, really. But in using the bike all the time, what I've found is that I was able to use it a lot more. I think we've covered in the last 3 or 4 months probably 3,500 miles. Ordinarily I would be struggling to sort of wedge 1,000 miles in during the summer, again because of those commitments. And then we got the BSA, which again was a game changer. It's a slightly better pillion bike than the classic 350. To be fair, there's not a lot in it, but it is a slightly better platform for carrying a pillion. So that brings us on to the first sort of subject of this video, really, choosing your bike carefully. Sports bikes, generally speaking, are not particularly good for carrying a pillion. They're a sports bike, a solo rider's sports bike first, and then when it comes to riding with a pillion, that's a secondary consideration for the designers when they're sort of designing and building those bikes. They'll do it, some of them do it well, but they're not designed for it. So if you're looking for a bike that is going to be good with a pillion, obviously off the top of my head, Tourers, purpose-built Tourers are going to be very good for that, you know, for that purpose. But you know, your modern classics and your roadsters also work very well. Sports bikes, in a lot of cases, not so much. So choose your bike carefully. If you can, when it comes to test riding a new bike, a new purchase, see if you can persuade the dealership that's loaning you the bike to let you have it for a couple of hours, and they'll allow you to take a pillion on the back. Now, some do, some don't, but I think it is worth visiting 2 or 3 dealerships until you find a dealer that's happy with you doing that, to ensure that you know you do get a bike that's suitable for you if you want to carry a pillion. I hear a lot of guys in the comment section telling me that quite often it's the choice of the lady in their life that decides what bike they have, especially if she travels pillion a lot, because she doesn't want to be sitting on the back of a bike that she feels insecure on and she isn't comfortable on. Your job as a motorcyclist, if you want to include your partner in this pastime that you've chosen, your job is to make her, if possible, fall in love with motorcycles. That way you're going to be able to get to ride a lot more than you would otherwise. Now, contrary to what a lot of people will tell you, power is not the be-all and end-all of a good pillion motorcycle. All power does is it allows you to accelerate faster. That's basically the only advantage it has. And that can be a minus for a pillion. You know, a pillion is sat on the back of a bike. They don't have a seat belt, they don't have anything really to hold them into the seat like they would in a car. They're relying, generally speaking, on a grab rail at the back of the bike, which isn't the same as being in a car. So a bike that is constantly accelerating hard and trying to push them backwards isn't necessarily a bike they're going to gel with. Low to medium power bikes are more likely to be successful for you if you want to include your partner in riding as a passenger with you. It's not your job as a motorcyclist to show them how good and fast a rider you are. It's your job to make them feel safe and secure so that they can enjoy the ride. Carrying a pillion on your motorcycle is a big responsibility. Their safety is in your hands, probably in a more acute manner than it ever could be in a motor car. You're responsible for their safety. I'll just tell you a story about a couple of lads that lived down my street when I was a kid. They were both brothers, they were both motorcyclists. They were both hotheads, if I'm honest, when they were riding. But there was a difference between the two. The older one, when he carried his girlfriends or whatever on the back of a bike, he would alter his riding style accordingly. The younger one, who was the same age as me, didn't. He still rode like a hothead. The end result of that was that on one occasion he had an accident and he put his girlfriend in a coma for 6 weeks. And when she finally came out of that coma, she was confined to a wheelchair for the rest of her life. That didn't bother him. He just dumped her and moved on to the next girl. But your actions on a motorcycle can have life-changing consequences for the person that's riding as a passenger with you. If you're the kind of rider that puts yourself and other road users in danger every time you ride a motorcycle, don't add a passenger into that melting pot. It's not fair on them. Now, the other thing to consider is insurance. Now, back when I started riding, motorcycles are classed as a passenger vehicle in that they can carry one passenger. The subject of insuring a bike and carrying a pillion never came up, but I've noticed over the last decade or so, it does come up. Now, when it came to me insuring the BSA a few weeks ago, all my bikes are on a rider policy, but unfortunately I've reached the limit of bikes that I can have on that rider policy, so I had to open a new policy especially for the BSA, and I did the usual search thing to get the cheapest fully comprehensive insurance, and I found one that, you know, was an acceptable price. It was only about £10 or £11 cheaper than the next sort of insurance company that came up in the searches. But I filled everything out, I was accepted for the insurance, and when it came to me actually pressing the button to put the insurance in force, there were some exclusions came up at the bottom that I had to read before I could push the button. And one of those exclusions were that I was not to carry a pillion. If I did carry a pillion, I think I still had third-party insurance, but in the event of an accident, the motorcycle was not covered for damage. That had to be at my expense. Now, this is a ridiculous situation. I don't know. I mean, I can sort of see that carrying a pillion does add a complication to riding because, you know, bikes are inherently unstable in the first place, and adding a pillion to it does destabilise the bike even further. But you know, keep an eye out for the insurance that you take out. As it happened, I then went on to the next insurance option, which, as I say, was £11, £10 or £11 more per year, and pillion cover was included on that, so that's the one that I went for. Not an awful lot of difference in cost between the two, but a huge difference to you as a rider as far as insurance liabilities go. So make sure that you are covered for a pillion when you take out your insurance. Now, the other thing is, yeah, you've bought a bike, it is designed to carry a pillion. When it comes to you carrying a pillion, there are some alterations that need to be made to the bike in order for you to be able to ride safely. First of all, tyre pressures. The rear tyres generally need to be run at a slightly higher pressure. Generally speaking, on the rear swing arm there'll be a sticker or a plate that will give you the respective tyre pressures for riding solo or for riding with a pillion. Generally it's only the rear tyre that you need to inflate a little bit extra. It'll be, I don't know, 2 to 4 psi more than riding it as a solo rider, but it makes a huge difference to the safety and handling of the bike. The other thing to take into consideration is the rear suspension. You may have to up the preload slightly so that the bike reacts normally when you ride it. If you don't, you will find the rear suspension too soft. It'll affect the handling of the bike. You'll sort of experience wallowing, that kind of thing, that, you know, it's just not something that you want to bring into the whole melting pot of riding the bike. You want the bike to behave as well as possible with a pillion on. So those are the first two things that you need to look at: your tyre pressures, to make sure that they're at a suitable pressure for carrying a pillion, and that your preload is set to a suitable tension for you to safely carry a pillion. The other thing that a lot of people often don't mention or take into account is the angle of your headlamp, because when you've got more weight over the back wheel, the rear end of the bike tends to sit down slightly, which will alter your headlamp angle and beam. That may need altering. Also your mirrors, exactly the same, because the bike is sitting down a little bit at the back. You may find that you don't have the same rearward view that you would normally have through your mirrors, so they may need adjusting. Other than that, providing your rear suspension is set up correctly, you shouldn't notice any differences in the handling of the bike. I've heard people saying that, you know, when you're carrying a pillion, the steering can go a little bit light. Providing you've got the right tyre pressures and your preload set up correctly, that shouldn't be the case. That would only happen if you haven't got the bike set up correctly, in my opinion. Now, another thing that I think is a must for carrying a pillion, especially if it's your other half, is luggage carrying capabilities. You'll get more use out of the bike if you can use it to go shopping, whether that be for groceries or whatever. I mean, I haven't been to the supermarket in the car now for about 4 months. We use either the Classic 350 or the BSA all the time now. In fact, I've been scratching my head lately as to whether I need to retain a car, but I suppose we've got winter coming, so maybe I do. Also, you know, days out, we like to go to the York outlet to sort of top up on clothing, etc., a couple of times a year, which is about a 50-mile ride. Also, you know, Paula likes to go and visit garden centres, and she buys pots and plants and one thing and another. You need to have the ability to carry a small amount of luggage, or goods or purchases, or whatever you want to call them. That'll mean you'll get more use out of the bike than if you can't carry anything, because if you're going somewhere specific shopping, if you don't have luggage carrying capabilities on your bike, it's more likely that you'll leave the bike at home and you'll take the car. So that ensures that you'll get more use out of the bike. And then we've got clothing for the pillion. Now, this is a tricky one. We live in this world, this sort of nanny state world nowadays, where everybody believes that you've got to spend, I don't know, 500, 1,000, 1,500 pounds on safety equipment for the pillion. Now, that is entirely up to you and your partner. You're both responsible adults. You can decide what level of protection you require. But I will say that, you know, over the years, I've had one or two girlfriends or partners that have insisted they need the best of the best. It's cost me £1,000, even up to £2,000 for helmet, clothing, boots, gloves, etc. for them. They've ridden with me 2 or 3 times and then decided it's not for them, and that equipment has just gathered dust in a wardrobe somewhere. I think initially it's a suck it and see situation. Make sure that they are adequately protected but wait and see if they're going to stick at it before investing a lot of money in safety equipment. So, riding technique with a motorcycle. Practice your gear changes and perfect your braking. Late hard braking is not good when you've got a pillion on board. You'll experience a lot of fork dive. It'll catch them unawares. It will make them feel insecure. So practice your braking, look well ahead, sort of release your throttle well ahead of any sort of dangers or hazards that you can see ahead of you. Let the bike coast and brake gradually. Same with gear changes. Fast, hard gear changes are going to make your pillion lurch backwards and forwards. It's not good for their confidence and comfort. So practice your gear changes, practice your braking. Now when it comes to braking, concentrate more on your rear brake. You've got more weight over your rear wheel now with the pillion on board, so you can use your rear brake more effectively than when you're riding solo. And the advantage of using more rear brake than you normally would is that you get less fork dive. And again, fork dive, making the bike lurch forward, makes the pillion feel insecure, uncomfortable, and it's going to make them less likely to want to travel with you. So smooth, sedate braking, looking well ahead of you, and thinking about them all the time and how your actions on the brakes and the gears are going to affect them, go a long way to a sort of successful riding partnership, if you understand what I mean. And of course, it goes without saying, speed. Keep your speed down. The bike's weight has increased considerably compared to when you're riding it solo. So braking isn't going to be as keen as it normally is. It's going to take you longer to stop. It's going to take you longer to accelerate, which I think is probably a good thing. As I've already said, you don't need a big bike to carry a pillion. I mean, looking back to my youth, I had an 11.8 horsepower 125, and myself and my girlfriend every year, at least once a year, used to do 12 to 1400 mile tours on that bike with camping gear sometimes. Power is not the be all and end all of a successful pillion carrying motorcycle. Quite often you'll find your partner will prefer the more modestly powered motorcycles to the high powered motorcycles, because the more gentle bikes from the point of view of a pillion. Now, communication on a motorcycle, obviously you can get intercoms, in-helmet intercoms nowadays. I've tried them, they're okay. I don't particularly like them myself. I know Paula preferred it when she could just talk to me whenever she wanted, but that was the problem, she just talked to me whenever she wanted. You can communicate without aids like that very easily on a motorcycle. If you're traveling at below 30 miles an hour, it's very easy to shout to each other and hold a conversation. Depending on the wind direction and the wind severity, you can even hold a conversation up to 40 miles an hour. Other than that, a tap on the shoulder to get your attention from the pillion, to pull over or whatever, or just to get your attention so they can convey a message to you, is all that's required. And obviously, if you're stopping at junctions, traffic lights, that kind of thing, it's really easy to talk to each other. Not as easy as in a car, admittedly, but communication is still quite feasible on a motorcycle unless you're traveling at very high speeds. Now, there needs to be some rules in place. Obviously, you need to talk to the pillion about getting on the motorcycle and getting off it. A bike is heavy at the best of times. You stick another person on the back, and especially even at a standstill or at low speeds, that bike can be very unstable. It will have such a weight that if the bike tips beyond a certain angle, you will not be able to hold it up. So you need to have some rules in place in order to make sure that there are no mishaps, especially whilst getting on and off the bike. Now, I've heard people say that you should always have the side stand down when a pillion gets on it. I mean, I know where these people are coming from, but my personal view is you should build up your strength to be able to cope with it. As soon as you start to rely on other aids in order to stop those kind of mishaps, you're relinquishing some of that responsibility to those aids, like a side stand. I prefer to make sure that my side stand is up before I get on it. That keeps me well practiced and enhances my strength and my ability to keep the bike stable while I'm getting on and off. It's all part and parcel of keeping yourself fit to ride a motorcycle. It's like I say, if you start relinquishing those responsibilities to other aids, you're compromising your ability to control that motorcycle under all circumstances. So I prefer to have my stand up, and she always has to ask me if it's okay to get on the bike. Now, how she gets on the bike is entirely up to you, whether she uses the foot peg to step up onto the bike. Both the Classic 350 and the BSA are low enough, and Paula's not very tall, for her to be able to just swing a leg over it and get on without having to do that. But you need to work out a procedure, if you like, for her getting on and off the bike. And it's the same when getting off the bike. The passenger shouldn't attempt to get off until you have both feet down on the ground to support the bike is in neutral, and you're ready for that jiggling about that the bike's going to do while she gets off. So you need to have some ground rules in place that you both understand, that your passenger will adhere to at all times. Now, the rest of it is just sort of physics, really. I've read one or two articles where it says that the passenger should hold onto the rider to keep the centre of gravity low. I disagree with that. I think if they're inattentive and occasionally they get caught out and they're holding on to you, there's the possibility there of them pulling you off balance, or at the very least distracting you. To me, a grab rail is the best device for pillion safety, for them to hold on to it. It's firm, it's solid, it's designed for the job, and that's what they should be using. Other than that, a pillion needs to learn how to ride a motorcycle to some extent. Obviously, they need to lean with the rider and not sort of move the body out of line with the sort of trajectory of the bike, which could upset the handling. The rest is just practice, really, working as a team on a motorcycle. But when you get it right, when you've got the right bike, when you've got the right gear, when you've got the right pillion who knows how to behave on a bike, I think you've got one of the best travelling combinations on the planet, to be honest. It's a great way to travel around. As I say, you have no hassle parking a bike. It doesn't usually cost you anything to park a bike. You don't usually have any time limits on how long the bike can be parked up. It frees you up an awful lot. Obviously, there is a little bit more to it than I've been able to cram into this video. I'm just getting conscious of the time now. But yeah, give it a try. I mean, I've got a lot of people in recent videos commenting that they never take a pillion. I think, there may be reasons for that, which I can imagine for some people. But I think a lot of you are probably missing out on something. The art of taking a pillion is not just about, them coming along with you for a ride. It's about you both enjoying it. And in order for you both to enjoy it, you as a rider have to make some concessions to the pillion. It's not a matter of them just fitting in with what you want to do. It's a matter of you adapting to their presence on the bike as well. You know, a bike that is designed well for pillion use, quite often I find handles better with a pillion on than it does solo, and that includes the Classic 350 and the BSA. You know, they're both great bikes in their own right when you're riding them solo, but they really come into their own when you've got them set up correctly and you've got a pillion on board. There's nothing quite like it. It's a great experience. Right, once again, thank you so much for taking the time to watch this and my other videos, and in doing so helping to support this channel. I really do appreciate it. I'd also appreciate it if you would leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you're not already a subscriber. I am of course going to be back on Friday, so until then please ride safely and I'll see you soon.